Hey, everybody, it's me, God's comic Brad Stein, and this is Brad Stein Has Issues with Comedy. Conservatism and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity, and that clarity will become even more clarified today with our special guest, James Spencer, who has his own podcast, Thinking Christian. If you know anything about me, about my life, my comedy, my acting, my writing, my interpretive dancing, my cobbling. I'm a cobbler on the side, of course. Who isn't? My clay making. I don't make actual vases or cups or anything along that line, just clay. I just like to make piles of clay, but it's abstract and it's my version of art. And who are you to judge? And what makes you think you can come on my show and judge me right off the bat? Sickens me. Wyatt, what do you think is causing this judgment of my pile of clay being considered an abstract form of art that is beautiful and has been highly underrated when it comes to historical pottery making?
Do you have it like baked in a kiln?
No.
Oh, have you like sculpted a
Nah.
beautiful? Oh,
Just
have you even
Just-
taken it out of the container?
no. It's sticky. I don't want to get my hands all dirty and whatnot.
Okay, I might have an answer to your question then.
Please.
Yet no one's gonna admire your work if you haven't worked on it.
Let me say this, though. Have you ever seen that thing where the guy took a banana and duct taped it to the wall and some guy gave him $1 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So why can't I take some modeling clay out of the package, still has a cellophane around it, and drop her down and say, huh? Ta-da! You tell me. You justify that, oh banana-loving wall guy.
There literally is nothing stopping you. And I guarantee you, if a famous artist did exactly that, it would sell for $500,000.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. The true art is nothing but notoriety,
That's exactly right.
which I guess you could say is a metaphor for the human condition, is what I would use when I tell the art curator why they shouldn't kick me out for my amazing clay on plate sculpture.
So, and the other thing you need to understand is I'm also trying to get famous by not being famous. So I'm also, it's like a double-sided sword. Take the clay out of the thing, leave it in the deal, just pop it down there. So that's life. That's art. Who are you to tell me it's not? And you've never heard of me. That's given me an even more unique value because I don't want to be famous, and that's where my fame comes from, because I'm humble. So I just feel like there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that are missing, and I was hoping you could help clear it up before we got into something substantive, because right now I'm sure people are snoozing.
Actually, that is a great idea for an art piece. You have a piece of art, and then you have underneath it a tally of like $10 million. But you subtract from that 10 million how many Instagram followers you have. Meaning, the more famous you become, the less valuable your art becomes. Thus, turning the entire concept of the modern art world on its head. And then getting kicked out of the art gallery.
Wow. Wyatt, I was just trying to start my show, and we have redefined art, or as I like to call it, I don't even want to call it modern art because that's been taken. I want to call it future art.
Well, no, it's the opposite of art. It's tra.
Yeah.
We've invented tra.
Ha 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 ha. Okay, so kind of like the dyslexic version of what art has always been known.
Well, no, regular art is all about metaphor, simile, and other forms of creative expression. Ours is deriving its value not from the actual meaning behind the artwork, but rather what we can hopefully convince people it actually means.
Okay.
And what it means is always the same thing. Give me lots of money.
Yeah. That's it. So
Yeah,
again,
that's it.
again, like I said, I stumbled on this idea just the second people saw it happen in real time, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
also has its own art form, if you ask
Well,
me.
I would say it's more of a trap, but
Okay.
you'll come
Well,
to
right. No, no, no.
you'll come to
It's traw. But again, having just coined the phrase,
Yeah, yeah.
I got to get used to using it as part of my vernacular. But listen, I got to say
Mm-hmm.
this, Wyatt. It's been an interesting week last week. Now, this is Monday night. So Monday night is not the same as last Monday night. But I don't know if you're aware of this or not. But last week, a couple interesting things happened. One, everybody got frustrated and angry at President Donald Trump because he wouldn't release suddenly the Epstein files that Pam Bondi promised to release. And everybody was up in arms. They said, of course, he's in it. He's in the flight log. He is on the list. No wonder he doesn't want. Forget the fact that Joe Biden had it for 4 years and could have easily destroyed Donald Trump by saying, look, it's one of the pedophiles. But he didn't release it because, maybe Biden was just maybe he was biding his time. I don't know. It was a little pun. But anyways, it didn't get released. Well, then everybody's jumped on the bandwagon. Aha, he's got something to hide. Sure enough, Trump is trying to not be transparent. He ran on transparency, and now look, he is not transparent. He is opaque. Does opaque mean non-transparent?
Opaque means not transparent. It means you cannot see through the item.
Okay, so we would say then the Trump administration, when it comes to Epstein's file, is not transparent, but in fact is opaque.
Yes.
That's what we could say. But here's the deal. Then a couple days later, he said, look, there's really no file. If you're talking about the man took a list and said, this guy's a pedophile, he's on. Oh, well, she showed up and she did that. And oh, don't forget this guy. He didn't do that. It was more like you got logs because you had to fly in and out, and everybody knew. Now, I don't know anything about it. I never, I want to say I'd never expected the files to be released. That's not true. When he ran on, they're all going to be released, when Pam Bondi said, I got him and you about to see him, I believed him because that's one thing we do have going with Trump that we have held on to with the skin of our teeth is that he's going to expose everything. That's what he was voted for more than anything. People voted for a man who got in and said, I'm shaking it all up, exposing everything, unveiling the darkness, every criminal, every person that's compromised, everybody from the most famous to the least who has created havoc, who has breached the Constitution, who has tried to destroy people's lives with lawfare. We're going to expose them all. And then we're going to begin indictments. And those indictments, if then proven to be true with the information, and the all of the truth that is discovered and the evidence, they will pay the price. If they're innocent, they should go free. I don't want any innocent person to be put in harm's way, clearly. But if you're guilty, you should pay a price like everybody else. And I got to tell you this, especially if you're in politics. Why? You were voted on to represent the average Joe or Joette, depending on how desperate you are to make sure that both sexes are represented in your little nomenclature. But here's the thing. He did say a few days later, well, listen, you can't just throw people's names out there if there's not proof that they did anything, and yet you're going to apply that. And what if a guy flew in and he didn't know what he was getting into and said, oh, get me out of here. So there's some credibility in that, I guess. Yeah. What if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? What if you walked into some bar that was a big drug haven and people have video of you? There he is. He's walking there. He's a drug guy. He's like, I didn't even know it was a drug place till I got there. So I'm just saying it's possible, right, that some guy got duped or got in over his head. And so I'm just trying to say that I don't know what's true and what isn't. I don't know who's guilty and who's not. I don't know. And I don't want people's reputation to be besmirched without due process. So in that regard, I guess I can agree with that. The problem was they overpromised. Bondi said we're going to release everything, and Sully said there isn't anything. So that's a problem because now we trusted you, and that's what has been lost in America. When it comes to politicians, we trust none of you. When it comes to the media, we trust none of you. When it comes to the pharmaceutical industry, we trust none of you. When it comes to the physicians and the CDC and making the best medical decisions for the most amount of people, we trust none of you. There's no trust left. And with a country without trust, there can be no foundations. There can be nothing to stand on. There can be nothing we can depend on. There's no way to have an argument or a conversation or a scientific inquiry if we don't have some absolutes that we can count on that aren't going to move. They're immutable. They stay there. So when we deduce and induce, we have something that we can depend on, that is a rock and not sand to stand on. And it's all been destroyed, all of it. And now we've discovered that Tulsi Gabbard, who I met and had a wonderful conversation with and have a wonderful photo in. Matter of fact, why show that photo? There we are, a beautiful woman, and surfs. It's like, come on, and shoots guns well. And anyways, got to the bottom of apparently, the evidence is that Barack Obama knew that there was no Russian interference with the 2016 election of Donald Trump. He knew it wasn't true, and he said, I want you to manufacture some to try to destroy this man's presidency. Folks, if that's true, everybody's saying treason. I don't know if it's treason. I know that to be convicted of treason is a very, very specific type of crime. It's very difficult because, and it should be, because it's the worst sin you can commit against your own country is treason, which is to try to have other enemies of your country destroyed, and you help them. It's a Benedict Arnold thing. I'm going to surreptitiously or blatantly help someone who hates this nation destroy it, and I'm going to sell to the highest bidder. So treason is a big, giant deal. As a matter of fact, I think it's a death penalty thing. It's like as big as it gets. You forfeit your life for it. Well, so I see people saying, well, Barack Obama, who was a participant and we have evidence, is in fact has committed this high crime. But whether that reaches treason or there's another crime for it, an insurrection, I don't even know what the other term would be. I'm not a political analyst. But apparently she has given it to the Department of Justice, and they want them to take a look and see if there should be an indictment on a former president. Now, here's the thing. Some of you out there, if you're a conservative and maybe you're a Trump supporter, you're going, ha, we did it. Here we go. Let the chips fall where they may. It's all being exposed. It's all happening. Let's rock and roll. Time for justice. And that's what you're thinking is happening. And you see all the memes, and you see all the podcasts, and you see all the Instagrams and the TikToks and the little clickbaits and this and that. And when I saw all that, are you ready? I thought to myself, whatever. So, yeah, former president literally conspired with the FBI and other members of Congress and citizenry to destroy a man's reputation, the next incoming president, and lie about him and slander and malign and try to create this false narrative and see if they can maybe even put him in prison, right, if they get convicted of this thing. And I guess he is completely guilty from what we can tell in at least pushing that narrative. So if that's what happened and it's true, he is guilty. And I think to myself, so what? Nothing mark my words, is going to happen to him. Nothing is going to happen to Nancy Pelosi. Nothing's going to happen to Hillary Clinton. Nothing's going to happen to Anthony Fauci. Nothing's going to happen to James Comey. Nothing is going to happen to Millie. Nothing. I'm just saying, and I hope I'm wrong, frankly. I don't want Barack Obama to be thrown into prison because I didn't vote for him or don't like him. No. I want him to face the consequences. If he did a criminal act, he should face the same consequences anybody like you and me, a regular citizen, would have to face. That's all I'm saying. Everybody's equal under the law. They're not. We've seen it. Nobody's equal under the law. Not if you got the money, not if you got the power, not if you got the status, not if you have the influence, not if you have the connections, not if you have the network, not if you have the right people in the right places watching your back. Nothing's going to happen to these people. And the Republicans own the House, Senate, the executive branch, and they even have a conservative majority in the judicial branch of the Supreme Court. So they have all the power and the wherewithal, and now apparently the evidence to formally make indictments towards Clinton, who paid for it, and Obama. I mean, it's there. That's what it says. They're not going to do it. That's my prediction. And if they do, somehow it will vanish, it'll disappear. So why wouldn't, if somebody came up to you and said, I accuse you of a crime, and it was a lie, and you could prove it was a lie, and they tried to destroy your reputation and destroy your family and destroy your ability to make a living and destroy your ability to even interact in culture and society, and it was a lie, and you could prove it, and you then were asked, do you want to press charges? Why wouldn't you? There's only 3 reasons I can think of. One, you don't press charges because you're compromised. Somebody will come to you, and I don't know how this game works. I'm not in politics, but somebody will come to you and say, hey, just letting you know, you're going to drop the charges or your children will die, or your mom will die, or you'll die, or something's going to happen. That would be one. You're compromised. You've been threatened. Number 2, you're in on it, and you've taught each other, I won't get you in, you don't get me in. Even if you do throw some charges, they will get thrown out. Fear not. We're all going to play this game to give the illusion to the peasants that we actually care about reality and truth. But don't worry. Nobody's going to get in trouble. We take care of our own. We're the elite. We're the special ones. We're the important ones. We're the ones that are getting money. We're the ones that are getting the big payback for choosing to become senators and congressmen and mayors and governors and presidents, right? And I guess the only third, maybe there is a third option. Maybe there's a third option. Because the second option is you're in on it. You're part of the club. The only other option I could come up with would be a Christian one, and that is you choose to forgive. That you could do too, I guess. But I think to forgive is a far cry from still holding someone to justice. What do I mean by that? If somebody is going on murdering a bunch of people, and one of them happened to be your child or your mother or father or whatever, and you chose to forgive them, that's up to you. And perhaps that would be a miraculous, supernatural way to live your life, and people would be stunned. And perhaps there's something beautiful and holy, and people have done this, that will come from it. Maybe that's true. But it would be unjust if they weren't brought to trial and had to pay a price. Otherwise, your society cannot function. It cannot work because there is no balance. It's out of balance when someone kills and is caught and is not convicted. We need balance. God made a world that literally states if you sin, you reap the consequences. He didn't say, I'm going to punish you. He said, this is how the rules work. This is how nature works. Here's how the universe works. And it needs to, because then when you plant good things into good soil, you get a good crop. So we can't just sort of pick and choose. If the concept works, it works for everybody, either the negative or the positive, depending on which side you find yourself on. So that leads us to this idea of God and God himself. Is he just? He has to be. Matter of fact, that would come from his nature. And is there times and moments when God feels unjust or that he's allowing evil to happen, which is one of the top reasons why atheists become atheists when they watch cancer in children, or they watch Auschwitz, or they watch any kind of natural disaster. They go, God, if you were good, you would have said no immediately, and yet there it is. And there's lots of answers, or at least responses to this, not always satisfactory, not always enough to make us feel right. But if you think Christian, you have to go deep and you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to realize that some of these answers are going to be difficult and mysterious and maybe not satisfying, or maybe not even compelling. And maybe there won't even be an answer. It's going to be simply a I don't know. And God would say, trust me anyways. And that feels a little unfair. He's got the jump on us because he's God, so he understands things, but we're way limited. So thus, it really feels difficult for us to move forward with things when it feels like God should be intervening, because you feel like I would, and I'm a sinner. Why wouldn't God? I wrestle with that, and one of the things on Brad Stein Has Issues is I want to talk about the hard things of being a Christian. I want to talk about things that don't make sense, the things that make us doubt and anger and shake our fist at God. And yes, I have done that as a Christ follower, because sometimes I simply say, I need you to come up and reveal yourself and help me understand this moment. Matter of fact, I did a daily Brad about this. And folks, in order to try to give you a well-rounded podcast before we get to our guest, who is James Spencer, who has the podcast Thinking Christian, I want to show you what you can see if you subscribe to Brad Stein Has Issues. It's $2.99 a month on my YouTube channel, and it allows you to get all the daily Brads as well as full interviews with all these people, because you're not going to get them all watching this or listening on live audio. But I always like to give you a flavor, a little taste, a little spiritual depth of a daily bread, so you get a flavor for it, a sense of it, a feel for it, and maybe you'll want more. So on the heels of what we've just been discussing about where is God sometimes and how do we move forward in the midst of that, enjoy this daily bread. Hey, Earth God's Comic Brad Stein. This is your daily Brad. Have you ever wished God would give you more than he does? Well, I do. I'm battling that right now. And here's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about when Moses was in the wilderness. He went up into the mountain, and there was God in a burning bush, right? And talked to him. Hey, remove your shoes. This is holy ground. He then led him through the wilderness with a flaming pillar of fire and smoke. And I'm like, well, that would make it, I think, a lot easier to follow and be committed to that God when he's right there making it very clear that he has circumvented the natural order and has revealed himself. Yeah? John the Baptist saw a dove come from heaven and land on Jesus. But Jesus says, because you've seen, you believe? Blessed is he who has not seen and yet believed. Sounds like a cop-out. Sounds culty, actually. Hey, I don't have any proof for this thing, but just believe it anyways, and then you'll get great blessings. So we have a challenge as Christ followers. We have a challenge. And I guess it's no different than anybody who believes anything. Is if you believe it, you have to understand that the way that it's going to demonstrate itself to you in your day-to-day journey will not always be satisfactory, at least to you. You know, the analogy I've used many, many times, as anyone would, because it's something we understand, is parent and child. The parent's gone before, the parent created the child, the parent has wisdom, the parent has life experience, the parent can look over the horizon at what's coming, and the child can't. Not a little tiny child. They're brand new. They kind of have to rely on you for everything, including decisions. You know, it's just something we've all endured as parents, is disciplining our children when they don't want to be. First off, they don't want to be. Secondly, it hurts or it frightens. And thirdly, they think you're mean and evil because you're doing something that doesn't make any sense to them. Matter of fact, it's the opposite. It's just cruel and mean and bad and violent and hard. And here you are realizing, as much as you hate me, I love you so much that that's irrelevant to me, because when you someday see what I did for you to help and protect you from yourself, you'll be grateful. And I'm not even looking for your, this is interesting, I'm not even looking for your accolades to feel good about myself as a parent. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do out of love. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you respond. I don't care what happens. My responsibility is to building your character, is to building your life and supplying you the tools for the journey that one day you'll do without me. So I really don't care what you think about me, as long as I know that I'm doing everything for your good. It's an easy analysis that we can all understand if you've had kids. And you don't even have to have kids. You could have younger brothers and sisters, or anything where you are clearly have a knowledge that somebody else doesn't, and you're trying to help them through it, even if they don't appreciate it or understand it. Obviously, that's where God would be to the nth degree. The one thing we cannot overcome is that if God is real, his superiority to us isn't calculable. That's the problem. There's not a number that fits how much more God knows than us, how much more powerful God is than us, how much more aware and existence of his ontological being is in different areas of existence than we can even imagine, let alone our. We're not in any other dimension but ours. Until we believe, until we say yes, then we've entered the dimension of the Spirit. It's real. It exists. And people of faith of all stripes. Hindus, right? Buddhists. Jainism. Muslims, that other dimension. They believe in it. They see it. They feel it. They sense it. It's part of the nature of the spiritual realm that everybody kind of knows is real. And by the way, if you're a non-believer in God, and you feel like that's a fantasy and a foolishness, but yet you believe in a transcendent world, and find satisfaction in truth in the reality of, for example, beauty. You look at a mountain range and are in awe of a mountain range, and you sense a sense of beauty, a sense of mortality, a sense of insignificance in your size and in the area that you are inhabiting compared to what this mountain range is inhabiting, you are seeing what is, in a scientific term, rocks and mud and trees and ice, all in a big pile. That's what a mountain is. But you don't see that. You see something else. That's the spiritual realm. And you believe in it, and you are moved by it, and you love it, and you accept it. And yet you think you don't believe in supernatural things. Well, beauty's supernatural. And so we will never escape on this dimension the difference between the God that we have given our lives to as Christ followers and the limitations that we live in on this earth with 5 senses and with incredibly limited knowledge. I have seen God in my holy book connect to folks, talk to them, tangibly connect and do something by which you can say, there he is. There he is. And you know what, guys? It's not like I'm longing for that because he has to prove he's real. I want a relationship. You said you're my heavenly Father. My Father on earth is dead. I need a father. I need a father that I can cuddle up in his lap and have him hold me and say, yeah, I got you, son. I love you, son. You're safe, son. I really need that. And he ain't gonna do that. I might as well get that straight. God had never said you're gonna be able to see him. He actually said the opposite. You can't see me. Even with Moses, he had to turn his back so he could see only like sort of him passing by. Who knows what that looks like. But he couldn't see his face. So I certainly can't expect God to give me something he never has promised. And as a matter of fact, I really can't expect something from God who said, I can't give you. But I want it. And so I ask him and I pray to him, will you show me yourself in some other way? I sure would love to hang on to you today. I'd love for you just to say, there he is. There's my Father. I know you're great. I know you're beyond my imagination. I know you're beyond my ability to grasp the depth of what you are. I get it. But you're the one that said you were my Father. You were the one that said you know the numbers of the hairs on my head. You're the one that told me that you care more about me than a flower or a sparrow that falls. You said that intimacy. You said we're friends. So I'm trusting you that that's true, and I like to talk to my friends and see my friends, go to lunch with my friends. I'm asking you to show yourself to me somehow in that way. In a way you can. So I know that my friend is here, my Father's here, that we are together. We are interacting. It's real. And I need you. That's what I've been praying for. That's what I've been asking for. Why not? He's God, I'm not. Howdy. But he's mine. So I'm going to take him at his word. Hang on for the ride. Realize that I believe without seeing, but just know somehow, some way, he's going to reveal himself to me in a much more tangible way. So I can hold his hand and say, look, Dad's got me. I'm going to believe for that. This is God's Coming, Brad Stein. This is your Daily Brad. If you guys go to iTunes or Apple Tunes, you can see listen to Brad Stein Has Issues on Life Audio, which is really growing in that sphere. It's a Christian podcast network, but it's doing quite well, and Wyatt does all the editing. So I give him credit, give him a little pat on the back that my son went from being a novice to a complete plebeian to becoming an apprentice, to becoming a laborer to becoming an expert, a master. He hasn't landed in any of those spots yet, but he's been around and dabbled in them all, which is just like art. He dabbles in it. But I got a guy here that doesn't dabble in art. He's actually has a podcast and is a doctor in theology. So when it comes to Christian worldview, seeing the world through Christian eyes, which we all need to do if you're a Christ follower, so you can assess the things that we look at that happen on a daily basis, look to redeem them, fix them, or at least put a magnifying glass on them so we can view them properly. You got to understand what it means to be a Christ follower, and the discipline that comes with that to become a disciple means you got to study, you got to listen, you got to read, you got to get in, you got to really prepare yourself so that you can defend your faith with dignity. Lost art, I try to hopefully challenge you with Brad Stein Has Issues and with my comedy. And when I come to churches, if you're a church, bring me in. I will bring laughter, but I will seek you to go to discipleship, the next phase. And that's kind of what my comedy has become, a ministry. But a guy that's really good at that and has a podcast you also might want to watch, and after this, I'm sure you will, is the next guest on Brad Stein Has Issues. Again, a doctorate and the host of Thinking Christian. Please enjoy this time with God's comic Brad Stein and James Spencer. How do you do, my brother?
I'm doing well, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I just was excited to connect with you. I love what you're doing. I love the idea of thinking Christian. I think that that is certainly a lost art in the West in the last number of years. I can't speak for the rest of Western culture. Honestly, I'm an American, so I kind of speak from an American perspective. But certainly in my little realm and sphere of influence in the church in America, I do believe that a very hugely missing link in, I don't know, growing the church in a beautiful sort of historic way uh, has been lacking sort of the depth of theology and apologetics and philosophy and everything that has been the heritage of Christians for a millennia, and really seeing that Christianity isn't a religion. It's the truth. The Bible is the revelation of reality. It's making huge claims. But if you see the world through Christian eyes, at least it makes sense. So tell me, if you would, just to let my viewers and listeners know a little bit about you, kind of what brought you to this deeper dive and just your whole ministry as going forward as to what you're trying to accomplish in culture in 2025.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, I actually, so I was previously an academic dean at Moody Bible Institute and decided to resign and go into the nonprofit sector. So I'm actually with a different organization now called the D.L. Moody Center.
Oh,
And the
okay.
D.L. Moody Center is actually separate from Moody. And
I got
so
you.
it's a little different. But in that transition, I started teaching for a group called the Right on Mission. And Right on Mission provides Zoom-based courses for just sort of interested lay Christians within the church. And I got tapped to teach a course called Developing a Christian Mind. And the textbook we use for that course is by Harry Blamires. He was a student of C.S. Lewis, and he
Oh,
was writing from the perspective of the UK.
yeah.
And as we're going through this book, there's tons of UK references from the 1970s that nobody in the class understands. Nobody knows what he's talking about because they're just foreign enough for us that nobody really grasped what examples he was using. And but he was arguing basically the same thing you just said, that Christians had stopped thinking Christianly,
Mm.
that we didn't have a Christian mind, that we were being carried along by the currents of the culture. And I just found that really compelling. And so in 2020, I actually wrote a book called Thinking Christian and tried to lay out what it looked like to use what I call a theologic as opposed to just plain old logic to live our lives, really looking through the eyes of faith and trying to understand the world from a biblical and theological perspective. And then we launched the podcast. And I think the goal really is just to help Christians understand that sometimes thinking good thoughts isn't enough. we need to be thinking godly thoughts.
Mm.
We need to move beyond sort of the way I usually phrase it is we don't want to settle for wholesomeness because only holiness will do. And so that's what we're trying to do with Thinking Christian.
Well, I mean, I love that, and I'm curious about kind of the way I wanted to approach this conversation with you. Clearly, you have a backdrop in Christian theology and history and so forth. So
Mm.
obviously, we're going to broach those subjects, and yet that's what you do on a regular basis on your podcast and so forth. So obviously, that's the direction we're going to go. But I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a different tack, in that I wanted to approach it almost. I'm not sure if this is the proper term, devil's advocate, like finding the flaws or the discrepancies or where the skeptic would disagree with Christianity or find it problematic, and kind of take that side of it so you can not only answer it. So not only are we educating believers into Christian worldview, but just kind of understanding the challenges. Because I got to tell you something. I'm an older guy. I'm on the last leg of my life. It's legacy time. If I do any good, it's to leave something behind that can help the next generation. And I've been a Christian since I was 9. So I got saved at a very, very, very young age, and went through trials and tribulations and mountains and valleys and prodigal journeys and everything else. So I'm not acting as though, from age 9 on, I began a deep dive into Christianity, but I certainly was always interested in trying to understand it deeper. But something interesting has happened to me, and I wanted to get your thoughts about this.
Mm.
The older I've gotten, I think I always assumed that as I got older as a Christian, more mature, old wine, fine wine, well distilled, I would be more at peace and more kind of content in my faith, really getting it and understanding it at the deepest levels, and just kind of basking in that contentment of it and until I'm ushered off into eternity. That has not been the case. I find myself more um I don't even know what the right word would be. More questioning some of the harder parts of Christianity,
Okay.
curious about the hiddenness of God. I find that very difficult. The pain, of course, is probably the biggest reason why people become atheists, I think, is the problem
Sure.
of pain and the evil they see on the earth. But here's the thing. Those are legitimate questions, and they're very difficult, very difficult. And as a believer, and that's the beautiful thing, I'm not going anywhere. But my questioning is causing me to find a more some turbulence in this part of my life as a believer than I expected. So, do you see that as typical, or do you I just want you to commentate on kind of my
Sure.
little thing, but see if there's a deeper perspective that I'm opening up here with what I'm discovering in real time.
I think that oftentimes what I find in just talking with people and interacting in the church is that people are really struggling with the day to day. If we live in the theory and the theology, which I've tended to over the last 10, 15, 20 years, right? That there are some relatively clean answers that we could give, and you could wax philosophical on how to solve these problems and what have you. But the reality is life happens.
Yeah.
And I've been married now for 26 years. I have 3 biological children and 1 adopted child. We've had multiple foster care kids in our home. We've gone through our own struggles. And there is a sense in which sometimes I feel like God's not there.
Yeah.
And so I can relate to that frustration. I think from a theological perspective, what I always go back to is sort of the framing out of the question of God and evil.
Mm.
This is sort of what we're getting at. Why is it that a good God would allow suffering? And I think the reality is that I always come back to is that framing is just off, because it's not just God and evil. He's not the only person in the room, let's say.
Mm.
It's God, us, and evil. And so if we look at the biblical narrative, what we see is that our best life could have been lived. We could have lived in perpetual Sabbath and harmony with God and creation if we had followed him, if
Mm.
we had obeyed him, if we had lived in dependence on him rather than seeking independence from him.
Mm.
And so now, as we interact with the creation that we're in, the fallen world that we're in, we often try to sort of sit back and say, well, the pain and suffering that I'm feeling is really God's fault. He could stop this. He could end this. And we've seen him in those in suffering in certain instances.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is that even within a fallen world, our best strategy is always obedience. It's always following, it's always trusting. And so, to the extent that we can, the way I like to think of it is keep God at the center of our attention. Even if we're frustrated, even if we're hurting, even if we're angry, if we can just keep God in the center of our attention and express those things to Him, we're going to find that He will meet us in those places.
Mm.
It's when we start feeling that pain and that tension, at least this is my experience with it, when I start feeling that pain and that tension and I try solving it myself, that God gets more distant. Because the reality is he's not moving away from me. I'm just moving away from him. I'm completely ignoring him. It's that line from Dirty Dancing, right? I'm putting God in the corner and and I'm leaving him there. I'm marginalizing him. I'm pushing him to the
Yeah.
side of my life saying, I got this one. But the reality is I don't have anything. And so we just need to be thinking through. I think that's part of the way I've dealt with a lot of these issues is not asking why would God allow, but asking myself, where is God in this moment?
Mm.
And how is it that I can respond to him from within the situation as opposed to responding to the situation itself?
Yeah. No, I understand. And I think that's true what you're saying, obviously. I think the problem is that those answers also often seem trite to those who are in pain, who are in the midst of challenges that just seem to be um, irreconcilable with a loving God because and of course we anthropomorphize God if that would be the proper context because we want to bring him down to our level. Hey, I would never treat my kid like that. So God certainly should. And you sort of preface this your answer with this idea of we were in fellowship, we were in perfection, we were in harmony, and then we abandoned it. Well, okay, so like I said, I want to kind of take a different, almost an
Yeah.
antithetical tact, so that we can really break this down in a way that might help people listening who are struggling. Hey, man, uh, don't blame me for Adam. I had nothing to do with that. So if you're like, that's like saying you get a, your great 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 grandfather was a slave owner, thus you're responsible for owning a slave. I had nothing to do with that, but I got stuck in the genealogy, in the matrix of the humanity that continued on. Because God could have made a new batch. He could have
Sure.
just said, I'm done with you guys. No, I'm going to keep doing this until somebody does it right. He could have, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Which by the way I think is a beautiful testament to God because what he said is I chose you, I'm sticking with you, you will
Yeah.
play this out. I could have
Yeah.
started over. Even with the flood, he kept his lineage alive, he kept the original lineage alive, he didn't just start from scratch. So there is something beautiful about that. Never will
Mhm.
give up on you, but I think it's difficult to feel um, the paying the price for something I had nothing to do with, but got stuck with because my parents had sex and decided to have a human. So, I mean, that's a hard question, man. It just is. And so, what would you say to somebody who might think of it like, I didn't sign up for this?
Yeah. I think number one, we exist in the state that we exist in, right? So, like, if my house ultimately caught on fire, but I didn't set the fire, I'm going to suffer the consequences of that regardless.
Yeah.
And so, we're not talking necessarily about culpability or what's normally called complicity. right? Where we look back to Adam and say, "Oh, I'm entailed in Adam's sin. I did the same thing he did." Sort of like you said, the slaves and the ancestors kind of thing. Just because my grandfather kept slaves doesn't mean that that's my fault. But it may very well be that I experienced certain consequences because of that. And so we see the reverberation of consequences down the line, not necessarily the reverberation of responsibility down the line.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect. And I would say the other aspect is, God has always been gracious throughout history in giving opportunities for multiple starts. Even just, we move from, let's say, Genesis 1, 1 and well, 1, 1 through 2, 3, where we see the creation and we see God's goodness, we see God's wisdom, we see God's benevolence. He's creating a place where human beings can flourish. Then we see in Genesis, 2, this sort of beatific utopian vision of everything he's providing for humankind, including in that chapter, the creation of woman, who is going to help the man and be his opposite. So they're going to be two puzzle pieces that really fit together. Genesis 3, we see the fall, where the serpent convinces humankind that God is not as good as he said he is. He is not as benevolent as he's supposed to be. He's not as wise as he's supposed to be, and he's not as sovereign as he's supposed to be. You can be God. But then by Genesis 4, we've got Cain and Abel. Cain, even though he brings a subservient offering, God doesn't automatically send Cain off into exile. What does he tell him? He says, you know what you need to do. If you'll do that, you'll be accepted. God is not short with us. He's very long and patient with us. And even as we see the flood in Genesis 6 through 9, right at the end of the flood, what does God do? He looks at it and he says, I'm no longer going to do this to my creation because the every inclination of man's heart is evil. I'm not going to continually remake this thing. I'm not going to flood it, remake it, because if that's what the cycle is going to be, it's going to be awful wet most of the year, right? And so he says, I'm just going to be patient now and allow this to play out, and I will work my plan of redemption ultimately through Abram and then all the way through Christ. And so I think that there's a sense in which distinguishing from that complicity, that it's my fault that this has gone this way, and the consequences of the path that human beings chose to take. That's part of it. And then recognizing that God is consistently seeking solutions to this. That we see the sending of his son as the solution that we can't provide ourselves, but that he's providing for us. So I think somewhere in there, again, do I think that someone who has just suffered some sort of a trauma in their life is going to be satisfied with that answer? Not at all. I tend to look to the book of Job, and I had this great conversation with Michelle Keener. She's done a lot of work in trauma studies in the book of Job. And one of the things she brings out is that when Job's friends initially come to Job, they just sit with him silently for 7 days. They're just there with him, present. My tendency is to think that that's a more powerful way of dealing with people in trauma, just being with them in it, than trying to give them a rational argument about, why everything's okay, even though you're suffering really bad. So I don't know that the words really work in the trauma moment, but I do think it's important for us to have these frameworks to understand how to approach those moments of suffering and pain, knowing that we have a good God who is going to work this in some way, shape, or form for our good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we got to have something to say. We got to have an answer somewhere. We got to give something to try to navigate something that we're in. Like you said, it's existential. I didn't choose, but I'm in. I'm in the game whether I like it or not. So you can complain all you want, but this is the cards I was dealt. So the fact that you can observe and contemplate your dilemma means there is no option. You're here, so what are you going to do with that? And so I guess that could be a beautiful thing, right? Because if you accept Christ's sacrifice, you get eternal utopia. You get unbelievable like treasure that you didn't
Right.
deserve, you didn't earn, right? God just decides, I want you to have this thing. So there is an amazing beauty, and it's funny, humans don't seem to find it they have a difficulty thinking that they should have to pay for their sin. They have a
Yep.
difficulty thinking that they should have to suffer for something that they do, but they don't have a problem thinking they deserve heaven. That's fine. Of course, I deserve eternal bliss, but boy,
Yeah.
not the dark side. So I think there does seem to be a narcissistic streak to that because we do like to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the reward, but feel like we have no obligation when it comes to the fruit uh, of our disconnecting to what God demands. And it's a hard thing that what he demands. He demands something I can't do, which is holiness. I can't do it. So explain that.
Well, I think part of it is just the way we approach God. So oftentimes, I mean, you mentioned, I wouldn't do that to my son, or I wouldn't do that to my child, right? And so we view the relationship with God through a parental lens, which I think is totally appropriate. But if we actually think about what parents are supposed to do, I suppose, I mean, I knew when I was growing up that if I did something that was going to potentially hurt me long term, or that was, going to damage someone in the moment I was doing something wrong that my parents didn't want me to do, that I was going to be disciplined.
Mhm.
And so I didn't just see my parents as loving people who would embrace me unconditionally and allow me to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. I had a reverence for them that cultivated a respect and a particular sort of action and orientation to them. Now, ultimately, as I got older, I challenged that, right? And you would suffer the consequences on occasion. But the reality was they're always trying to discipline me. They're always trying to do the things that are going to help me grow up to be a particular sort of person, that they're going to keep me safe, that is going to set me up for success in life. Like parents do that. And but my point is that we shouldn't just love our parents or view them as, warm, fuzzy, people who are always going to give us what we want. These are people that we should respect, that we should have a certain awe for and a reverence for. I often describe God in terms of I went with my family to go see the Grand Canyon. And the whole time there, I'm thinking it's just going to be a big hole in the ground. This is going to be sort of a blasé experience. And I got there and I was like, oh, not a big hole in the ground,
Yeah.
and just really amazing. But then as you're standing there next to it, you're also thinking to yourself, and again, I've got at that time, 3 kids with me. I'm thinking to myself, this is not a good place to play tag,
Yeah.
right? We've got to respect what this is. This is not just beautiful and amazing and unbelievable. It's also extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Like there's a threat here that we need to respect. And I think we've lost that perspective on God.
Mm.
And so as we think about, oh, I deserve heaven, we're thinking about the beautiful, awe-inspiring, wonderful aspects of God. But what we're doing is we're shorting that sort of dangerous aspect of God, that
Yeah.
drawing near to him, that doing certain things in the presence of a holy God is actually dangerous. And so when we lose that perspective on him, when we don't think of him like the Grand Canyon, or we went to the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland, and they'd warn you not to take selfies near the ledge because you tend to fall off, right? Like when you lose that reverence for God, you tend to fall off the ledge.
Mm.
And so I think that's kind of where we are. We've got this more pristine, warm, fuzzy view of God, whereas we should have not a fearful, God is always dangerous sort of view of God, like he's not for me, but that deep reverence that would come from recognizing the beauty and the danger of what we're encountering at the moment.
Yes, no, well, and I agree. And here's the thing, in this conversation, I probably will agree with virtually everything you say. I'm a Christian, so I have no option but to see, listen, if we're looking at things, if we're thinking like a
Yeah,
Christian, we're going to kind of think the same. Because there are principles that aren't going to be altered, but there does seem to be some wiggle room in the scriptures for how we
Yeah.
journey together because we're not the same. We're going to have differences of ethnicities, histories.
Mhm.
Some of us might be sickly, some of us might be rich, some of us might be in countries that we are deeply persecuted. So we're going to have different experiences. Yet we're serving the
Right.
same guy, but man, totally different history as to how I'm engaging this guy because my thing ain't even close to your thing.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But
Mhm.
I also remember reading about the idea of, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this since you think Christian. So you'll never make a mistake. You're going to give me the exact answer. Um,
We'll see.
yeah, but I think about the idea of the meat sacrifice to idols, and Christians. The early church was going, "Hey, can I eat this? Because it was sacrificed to this fake god." And he said, "Look, this God's not even legit. It's their way. It's superstitious. It's irrelevant. It's not real. You have power over the false god because you have that actual God. Blessed, anointed, eat it and enjoy yourself." So he gives us power over counterfeits, idols, false gods. Beautiful. But here's the interesting part. On the other end, he says, if your conscience feels that I shouldn't do this, don't. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you a latitude and an agency
Mhm.
to kind of set your own parameters for certain behaviors that you feel gets you closer to me and keeps us in the most sacred space. But here's the most baffling part of all this, and I want you to get your thoughts so I'm not
Yeah.
misperceiving. It appears what he says is this: hey, all things are lawful, not all things are expedient. But if you think this is a sin and you do it, you sinned. Almost like he's saying two guys can reach the same fork in the road, take two paths. You're both right based on your desire to serve God at the deepest levels, even though you have divergent conclusions. So, in a way, that's cool because he gives us the freedom to disagree and still be in the same boat together. But it's almost like he's letting us create, in some instances, our own sacred place, and he holds us accountable to it. So that's a lot of weight. So, am I reading too much into that, or is there almost a partnership with God where he almost lets us write some of our own rules when we get to the gray areas that aren't
Yeah.
specifically and purely made specific, that there are no it's the essentials. It's not about, is Jesus God, is he born of a virgin, did he rise by the essentials? No, there's no gray. But sometimes there is, and I'm going to let you choose.
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of an interesting perspective. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's right. So when we look at those again, those gray areas, and that's where we have to focus on. I appreciate the emphasis on not the sort of black and white
Yeah.
doctrines that we all need to hold to, and then there are certain moral teachings that we wouldn't have any flexibility on. But the reality is that there are gray areas, and this is why Paul can say, "I have become all things to all people that I might save some." You're right. He's able to adapt within a given situation and to a particular sort of people without compromising his deeper Christian convictions.
Yeah.
And he understands where the play is. He understands where he can move one way or another and still be well within orthodoxy, but allow other people to see Christ through their own eyes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fascinating thing that Paul does. I'd say the discourse in First Corinthians, which is where that meat sacrificed to idols is coming from, is almost supplemented by Romans 14 and 15. In Romans 14 and 15, you get another layer of the wrinkle. It's not just about your own personal conviction. It's also about how your own personal conviction might cause other people within the community of faith to stumble.
Hmm.
And so in this scenario, let's say I think it's fine to eat meat sacrificed by idols and you don't. And I see you on my way to a feast where I'm going to eat meat sacrificed to idols. And I say, hey, you should just come with me. And all of a sudden I'm dragging you along, right? And you're in your head, you're like, this can't be right. This can't be right. This can't be right. But I keep dragging along. I cut the meat. I put it on your plate. I'm like, hey, have some. It's okay. I'm in the wrong now. The reality is there's nothing wrong with the meat. The idols are nothing. There's nothing going on there. But because I've drug you along and I'm now basically cajoling you into eating this meat, I've done something wrong. I've caused you to stumble. And so we have these different wrinkles and these different ways of thinking within the Christian community that aren't just, hey, what should I personally be doing to take care of me personally? But I have to be thinking a step ahead of that and say, how is my action going to look to the other people in my community? Because I'm accountable for them too. And so I would say what we have there is a guiding logic. It's a way of thinking about the situations and decisions that we make to make sure that God gets the glory and that the church is built up versus denying God the glory and causing members of the church to stumble.
Mm.
And so our logic is driven by those sort of two key things. Is this glorifying to God? Is this going to showcase who God truly is? Am I really witnessing to him? And two, is this helping the body of Christ to grow up into the head of him who is Christ? Or am I sort of pushing other people down and hindering that growth? And I think if we can keep those two things in mind, that's where the adaptability comes into play.
Yeah, no, that's good. But I think the problem, the challenge, maybe is a better term, with that is it can easily unknowingly lead to legalism because suddenly you're not even sure how to integrate with people because you're not sure where they're at. And I learned something just again to show you how difficult Christianity is. It really is. I don't know where we came up with the idea that this is some easy canoe ride when you become a Christian. And what happened to me was I realized that I was never called to be a Christian.
Mhm.
Nobody was. You were called to be a disciple.
Mhm.
Christian is easy because I don't have to do anything. I can't. Jesus does all the work to become a Christ follower. He did it all. But he said, now, here's what I need from you
Mhm.
everything. It
Yeah.
did cost you something. Well, no, Christianity is free. It's easy. Just accept Christ. Yeah, that was free. That was easy. I did the work. Now it's your turn. Welcome to discipleship. And that's what you're kind of talking about when you just mentioned about trying to sort of figure out where somebody might be in their spiritual journey. And I think maybe an easier perspective, maybe for people to think this through instead of using an old Bible story would be, let's say, drinking. There's certain Christians that say, I don't, you can have a beer, you can have a drink, I don't care. The other guy says, no, you shouldn't drink, and so forth and so on. So what I really wanted to get at was not even giving your perspective on that. It's kind of like, but here's what I want to talk to you about what you just described. So I feel like in some respects, does that mean, let's say I invited somebody over from the church, I don't know him, trying to get to know him, and I'm thinking about, bringing out some wine, let's say. Okay, so theoretically, this guy might be a teetotaler and going, I think it's sinful to. So if I even said something to the effect of, hey, listen, do you drink wine? Because I'd be happy to. And he could say, oh, I don't drink. Oh, that's fine. I don't have to drink. That's simple. But that guy might be thinking, wait a minute, oh, well, you drink? So suddenly, me even trying to be sensitive to his concern about drinking causes him to find me in disfavor or somehow missing the mark. So you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Suddenly trying to be sensitive could also lead to causing this guy to become this judgmental, legalistic, dogmatic that people despise when they watch Christians behaving like that. It's part of what people find to be off-putting. So I don't even know if I have a question other than see how that's tricky though?
It is. And I think number one, Paul addresses this in chapters 14 and 15 of Romans. He talks about the weak are not to judge the strong, nor the strong to look down on the weak. And so internal to this logic, we have built in, and in that scenario, the person who's not drinking, right? Let's say they're the weak one. The person who's decided not to drink shouldn't look down on you because you've decided it's okay. Now, to the extent that that happens, you're right. It is problematic and it can start to look really legalistic. But I don't think I have a good way of navigating those situations. I can only speak to how I have handled it. You're not seeing it right now, but I have tattoos up and down my arms, about all the way down from my shoulder
So
to
you're
about
actually a
three-quarters down
heathen.
my forearm.
So you're a
That's
heathen.
right.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah, I've
realize.
got them on
Okay.
both.
Okay,
Right.
well, we'll pray for you here afterwards
I
to
appreciate it.
have God
Yeah.
dissolve them away. Okay.
And I got them all. I got them all after I was a Christian. Got some of them while I was an academic dean. And so these are not like old tattoos that I just haven't had removed. They're new ones that I got as a Christian, as a believer. And it used to be that when I would go places, I would make an effort to put on long sleeves. So I was going to meet somebody for the first time, and I still did at the time. I want to read the room and who's going to be there. Do you really want the tattoo to be the focus of attention, or do you just want to cover them up? What happens? But there are certain instances where I've been out and about, like at a gym or something like that, and I had, my tattoos showing, and other Christians just are uncomfortable with it. And so after I recognize that they're uncomfortable with it, I'll try my best to cover them up the next time I see them. The point of the tattoos was never to just show them off all the time, right? It's not like I've stopped wearing shirts, right? So that wasn't the point. They have internal meaning to me, and that's why I got them, and that's great. So whatever. But I also think that when I know that other Christians are going to be bothered by them, I do make an effort to just cover them up, because I don't want our interactions to be um, crowded out or dominated by the fact that I have tattoos. We could say the same for drinking, right? Yeah, I don't mind having a drink every once in a while. But if I'm meeting someone new and I don't know whether they drink or not, I usually don't even offer, right? We can just have water or soda, because honestly, it's not that big of a deal for me whether I have an alcoholic drink or a non-alcoholic drink. We can still have the same sort of fellowship without that. And so I think and if we put ourselves in the strong category, right, we could walk into a situation and say, yeah, I feel licensed to do this. I feel okay about it. But I recognize that some folks that I'm interacting with may not.
Mhm.
And so why would I even bother risking it? Is it really that big of a deal? I would look to some of Paul's passages where he talks about how he works. He talks about his rights as an apostle, and he says, I have the right to ask for this. I have the right to bring along a married wife. I have the right to be paid for my service here. But I haven't asked you for anything.
Mm.
I've decided to do this on my own because I didn't want to impede the gospel. And I think that's the sort of mentality we need to bring to these situations. It eliminates some of the awkwardness, and it keeps our mentality in the right place, right? It's not about my right to bear arms, right? In every situation. If I'm preaching up on stage, I never wear short sleeves because I don't want that to distract from the gospel message.
Yeah.
I don't want to give anybody any other excuse other than me fading into the background and God's word coming out of my face. I mean, I think that's sort of the mentality that we need to adopt. And then some of those situations sort of dissolve away. When we run into them, though, I think we always have to remember, and I think your point about discipleship is really crucial here. We always have to remember confession of sin is a marker of what it means to be in Christian community. When we read 1 John 1:9, this is something like, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. That's not if we do it, then God will do it sort of statement. It's an evidence as we confess God is faithful and just to forgive us. In other words, this evidences that God is faithful and just to forgive us. The fact that we're willing to realign our lives to his truth, to away from sin and toward God, is an evidence that we are part of this community that he has justified.
Yeah.
And so I just think that sometimes we overthink these things,
Hmm.
and that if we just sort of sat back and said, you know what, I played that hand wrong, my bad, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Folks, you need to listen to Thinking Christian with Dr. James Spencer. It's a great podcast. It's got a lot to offer. And thank you, brother, for just coming on the show, for being a man of honor and integrity and fighting the good fight and being out there to give some of us some direction who are floundering. And so I appreciate what you're up to and what you got going. We'll keep you in our prayers and we will be supporting you. Remember, folks, if they ever say you're politically incorrect, always say thank you for the compliment. It simply means you're a truth teller and you don't self-censor and you find truth and free speech sacrosanct, just like God does. And folks, I'm just a comic, but I'm doing my little part, which is what? Putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.